Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia, and welcome to the beginning of a new week, Conscious Warriors. It's great to be here with you this morning. Welcome to all our new people. If you're here for the first time, remember to hit like or subscribe to know when I go live or to know when a new video is uploaded. It's going to be a very special morning this morning, something a bit different, along the same lines, because we're always addressing what's happening for us with complex PTSD when it's internal and how that differs for us because of childhood developmental trauma. So this morning I want to share with you some information on how to stop holding a grudge and why we need to do the work to let it go. But in saying that, I also want to be able to give you a real life example of what's happening and why we need to do this and how we need to be willing to stop history repeating itself. So welcome to CPtsd Live, TV Live. And as you can see in Brisbane, Australia, it's very hot and sunny. We're right in the middle of summer now. So I feel for everyone who's had snow and as one of the people in group said, are freezing their butt off because it's so cold. Feel welcome to send some my way. Okay, so yesterday I had the privilege of driving for an hour and a half and going to see my nan, so my mum's mum. Good morning, girls. It's great to, it's great to have you here. And yeah, Ali, it's really, really hot, as in I've been to gym and can you tell? And I'm still perspiring because it's so hot. But that's okay. So yesterday, if you've seen the photo in the newsfeed, the boys and I went on a trip, road trip. We say road trip. And we went off to see my nan, their great nan, who's 96 years old. She's my mother's mother, and my mother is deceased and has been for about 24 years, I think now. And it was very interesting indeed as to what happened. So my cousins, who are just awesome, live down where she does, and we walked into the club, and the first words out of my grandmother's mouth when she saw me is, "You're fat." And I said, okay, we've had this conversation before, and I just went, here we go again. And she just said, had this intense look on her face, "You're fat." And I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, hi Nan, great to see you. Haven't seen you for a few years, but great to see you. And I was just being very kind and caring and understanding that she's in a different stage and place in her life. And I understand that. And I understand that for her, the exterior meant more than the interior. So I said to her, look, Nan, I'm not built like my mum. I'm built like my dad. Rubbish. And I'm like, oh my goodness. You can't deny something that's a reality. But anyhow, and then one of my cousins said to her, Nan, you're being rude. So she stopped. Anyhow, I went, as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, why would she be responding this way? Why would the size of someone, so not me, I didn't take it personally, and this is why we want to look at the trajectory of our life. So I'm not as fat as I used to be, but I'm also not as slim as where I'm going. Does that make sense? So it's a trajectory of, it takes time for everything to shift and move when you have been as unwell as I was. So bedridden for over 2 years. It's just, everything's not going to change overnight. Okay. And I didn't feel any guilt or any shame because I've been at gym for, I don't know, around 6 years. And it is what it is. And I'm doing the right thing and keeping on the right trajectory. So I was sitting there thinking, why? Why would this be such a big issue for her? And I went, it dawned on me, because my nan was one of 4 girls whose mother left them in the middle of nowhere, and the father was off droving, And then those 4 girls were split up and put with other family members to be raised. Now, what's the one thing back in the deep dark ages really for us that they would have said to these girls? You know, it's not just Nan, because I've seen her having conversations with one of her other sisters and talking about a young girl and her weight and everything. And it's a common thread that goes through their life. So I said to myself, what would they have been told? What happened? And then the light bulb went off. And of course, back in those days, women weren't allowed to have their own home, weren't allowed to have their own name on a checkbook. The only reason my mother got a house in her name was because her and my father got back together, and that was the only way she got her name on a house deed. And that's in our lifetime. And then all of a sudden I realised that I'm pretty sure my nan might have been living with maiden aunts. Their story to her would have been, if you're unattractive, so if you're fat, if you're overweight, if you're not this, and this, there would have been a whole lot of rules for them. You'll never attract a husband. Because, of course, what's the husband do? Back in those days, you know, which is still our lifetime, the husband was the one who was the provider and protector. Single women didn't really stand much of a chance, okay? So when we're able to look at the history, we can not only help ourselves and you know, not go down the same road, obviously, but we can also begin to unpack and see what was happening for them that would cause her to react in such a way that she's not thankful that we're there. You know, it's okay. Not being thankful for us being there is not the first thought in her mind, okay? Now, she went on. It gets better. She asked me where one of my family members were, and I said, look, they're off doing drugs and alcohol, and, you know, I've told them unless they can be clean for 2 years, then I can't have them as part of my life. And she sat there going, no, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. And I'm like, how far apart from reality is her life now, okay, that she can say, no, they're not. And in her mind, they're not. And I want us to think about this, because think about people who are narcissistic, okay, where they're, you know, they're trying to make their whole world revolve around what they think, what they believe, how they really believe things are. And I went, they do. They get stuck in this rut that won't face reality, basically, that, you know, this is what's really happening. And then she went on again and she said, and what do you think of your mother? And I'm like, okay, this is a bit of a crazy question. I said, I love my mum. Well, I didn't love her. And I'm sitting there going, I think that's the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life. How can you not love your own child? And so I didn't pursue that, but I was aware of the irony that when my mum was here, my mum finally, before she died, broke open and said that after 2 doctors told my mum that breast cancer can indicate issues with with the mother, I went, oh my mum finally opened up to me and said, oh my goodness, you know, I've carried all this stuff about my mum. My mum didn't love me. And then her mum, when she finally turned up, when mum was out of it, basically in a coma from all the drugs, I didn't do that. I'm not like that. And yet yesterday, because she's old and there's no filter, it was like straight out, I didn't love your mother. And I just went, wow, we've really got to develop this conscious awareness of what's happened in our history and not take people just at, you know, what they're saying. We've got to look a bit further than that. And especially for our relationships going forward, we want to make sure that we're not repeating history. So I came away from it all and I was okay, but I was really sad that this lack of love was continually passed down through the generations. Now, it was hard, really hard. And last night I just cried. Nick was here and I said, how can people consciously want to choose to not love their children? So anyhow, I understand it to a degree, but I still think that we make these choices. We make a conscious choice whether to love or not to love, okay? So we have a part of our brain that's called the anterior cingulate cortex, and the scientists call it the center of love. So the heart of love sits in our brain. Now, it's really, really important, this part of the brain, because it regulates our executive functioning, so our ability, our spatial ability. So think about all the things that we bump into. I used to be head to toe bruises because I would just bump in, because our perception, okay, is not online when we're triggered, and so much more. So it's all our fine motor skills and our ability to understand more than what we can see as well. That's what I've found. And so I want us to think about this. If there's a center of love in our brain and it connects our emotional, our limbic system to our fine motor skills, right, then we need to be doing everything possible in order to have a healthy brain as we get older, right, and considering that we are processing childhood developmental trauma, we want to continually be aware of and conscious of what's happening internally for us, so that we don't get into old age and have issues like dementia, Alzheimer's, etc., because the center of love is probably dried up for my nan. There's bits and pieces there. And I'm not saying that's the only cause. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's the only cause. I'm saying we want to do our best to have the center of love in our brain to be full and overflowing, so that we're functioning at maximal brain capacity. Now, what she showed me yesterday is that we don't want to hold grudges, okay? So I was able to sit there and have empathy and understanding. Okay, I can't relate to not loving your own child, but I can understand the depth of her pain, all right, that she's still holding on to. So if we're still holding grudges, and we're human and we do this, okay, we've got to be willing, okay, willing, not doing, but I needed to be willing to love unconditionally. So for those who know my daughter, who's chosen a different religion, if I am not willing to love my children unconditionally, they're not going to come back and know that they've got someone they can rely on. Now, unconditional love doesn't mean I accept their irrational behaviour or don't have boundaries. It means that I'm willing to work through whatever comes up in life, and we work through it together, okay? Now, when we've got grudges, all right, we want to be willing to say, what is the emotion that I'm holding on to? We can do our breathing and locate which part of our body, muscular, is feeling tight, okay? And if I'm holding on to emotions in that area, then I want to be doing the work. So we want to acknowledge that we have a problem. Be willing to acknowledge that, listen, I'm really cranky about this, okay? Actually, Nick said to me yesterday, why aren't you angry? I said, why? Why would I be angry about, the fact that this, it's all gone before me. There's nothing I can do to change what happened before. I can only change what's going forward. That's right, Chan. That's exactly right. That's what a good mum does. So we need to be willing to acknowledge that we're holding on to this and we feel really cranky about it, all right? Whatever the situation is that's happened in your life. Now, with trauma, of course, it's painful as, all right? There's no two ways around it. It's painful as, and we need language, and we need to be willing to say, right, I'm uncertain what's going to happen if I touch this pain, and that's why we seek out a professional, whether it's a trauma recovery coach or another mental health practitioner. Then we need to be willing to sit with someone and work through this pain as well. all right, because we have to be in a space where our brain, all right, our mind and everything is feeling safe and that we can manage this, okay? Now, so share your feelings in confidence with somebody who's separate from the person that you're feeling a grudge with, all right? Don't go to that person and try and work it through. We want to share it with somebody who's outside of the equation and impartial and can be there to support you and say, yeah, I can understand why you're feeling that way. All right? It all adds up. And then they're actually able to ask you questions as well to help you wrap your mind around different aspects. All right? And then we want to switch places. So walk a mile in their shoes, which is what I did with my nan yesterday, even though her face was really, and her verbalizing to me was very unkind. I'm like, what's it like to walk in her shoes? What would it have been like? And I actually said to her, she went on into some really, really not nice stuff about the family and that. And I said to her, Nan, all of these people are dead. They're gone. I said, and back in your day, women weren't allowed to have autonomy. You weren't allowed to buy your own home. You weren't allowed to have your own checkbook. There were so many things that were different for you back then, and it's different for me now. And in a way, it was soothing for her, because then she said to me, stay single. Just stay single. I'm like, no worries, Nan, it's all good. And yeah, Jan said, wouldn't it be cool if you could get trauma sponsors, like recovering alcoholics get sponsors, same type of thing, but for trauma? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and actually I'll keep that in mind. There must be a way to do that as well. I know in the States that they're doing sexual abuse recovery, but it's not everywhere. But they are trying to get it everywhere. So that's one form of trauma that is being addressed. So I think that, yeah, I'm not sure what, in Australia we don't have much of anything when it comes to this type of thing. So in America they do, and they are trying to bring out different forms of trauma, recovery groups for different forms of trauma. So yeah, hopefully worldwide it'll come. See, because I'm sitting here with you, talking to you, and we are at the forefront of all of this. We are right at the beginning of changing things up, not just for the generations, but for ourselves, those who come after us. And then what will happen is then the wider community, as people come together more, feeling that they can open up, then all of these things will become available. And I was thinking too that we need to be aware of it and that we can start moving things as well. So we don't have to wait for other people, that we can stand up and start making movement as well. Because the guy who started Alcoholics Anonymous in the States decades ago, they just started with a group of people in a house. It doesn't have to be formal, and you just need to be willing to work your way through it. Okay? So we also need to be willing. So we've switched places, walked a mile in their shoes, gained a greater understanding, haven't put our heart in a box and gone, well, you know, that's their fault, that's their problem. We're going, I'm willing to work through this from a space of love and caring and kindness as well. All right? So then we need to be in a space that, with or without an apology, we can accept the current situation. So when I look at members of my family and there's been great trauma, I've gone, right, I need to be willing to change my heart about and go, I need to operate from a space of love and kindness and caring in order that I feel whole and I'm keeping focused on where I'm going. And otherwise we just stay stuck in the past. Now, the next step is we want to determine if you want to and or need to have a conversation with the person. All right, that's something that's very individual. One of the key indicators here is if the behavior is repetitive, you'll need to determine if, you'll need to determine if there'll be a better outcome from having the conversation. So people who keep repeating their behavior, and even though you have a conversation, sometimes you get to the end of the rope and you say, there's no point in having this conversation because they're not willing to do their part and change their behavior. Okay? At least go and get help. And I know this because when I work through things with my adult children, and even just think about the little things at home. Like Nick and I negotiate. One of the things that we have to be able to do is negotiate. All right. When I'm not happy about something, I need to be willing to negotiate with Nick. Okay, what do you think should happen? What do I think should happen? And where's the negotiation? How are we going to manage this? And we need to be willing to do that in all our relationships. But if we've got somebody who's not willing to negotiate, then we have to ask ourselves, what's my one next step from here? Okay, so there's a big difference between those who do their work and those who don't and expect everybody else to change to their way of viewing life or doing life even, okay? So you've got to switch the brain on and work out what's happening with that person in your relationship. If you need to move on, then each time you think of the situation, identify your need, all right? And meet that need yourself or grieve for what you missing from the relationship, what you'd hoped for from the relationship, what your dream was from the relationship. So anyone who's been married and divorced will tell you that, sorry, getting comfortable, will tell you that one of the things that happens when we come out the other side is that we grieve for the dream and the hopes and the plans that we had in that relationship. And it can be the same, maybe not to the same extent, but it will be even with friendships, that we grieve the hopes and the dreams that we had for that friendship to be ongoing. So if you decide to have a conversation, even if you're nervous, and I was really nervous the first time I had to have one of these conversations, and we can say, look, I'm really nervous because this is my first time, but I want us to be able to have a conversation, okay? Be very clear on what you need from this point in time. So I need for this not to happen again, or we won't have a relationship. So it depends on what's happening as to how far along you're going to go, okay? These are my boundaries, X, Y, and Z, okay? So you're allowed to say, look, if this continues to happen, this is what the consequences will be, all right? So we want to put down what those consequences are, put them on the table, so to speak, for each other, and say, yeah, we're going to negotiate our way through this in order that we are on the same page. Now, if you're in a relationship that's healthy, you're both going to keep turning towards each other instead of turning away from each other. So you want to even put that in verbal language, that we want to keep turning towards each other, not turning away from each other. So use that as an example. The more with complex PTSD that we can wrap our minds around relationships, the better they will be for us as well, and we will be able to process so much more, okay? Because we will feel safe. We'll feel safe to be heard. Be prepared to listen. Listen to what the other person says and what you don't know. So be prepared that your behaviour may not be exactly, A-OK as well, and you need to modify your behaviour. And that's adulting, all right? But when we've got complex trauma, we haven't learnt to move into this stage. So that's a development as an actual developmental need is to develop our sense of self, okay? Because it didn't happen in our childhood. So when we do that, it makes it easier to listen to somebody else, because I know who I am, I know where I'm going, what I need to do, but I can listen to other people. We learn a lot about ourselves and we learn a lot about somebody else when we're prepared to listen. Okay, and now forgiveness. Forgiveness is like lighting a fire under some people, okay? I acknowledge that. If forgiveness isn't your thing, that's okay. But I want to help you to be able to forgive. One of the key phrases that a beautiful friend of mine who's a qualified counsellor taught me is, I am willing. And when she first, I had to do a lot of forgiveness work with one of my parents. And I said to her, this is really hard. And she said, you don't have to do it all at once. Just say, I am willing. And you say as many I am willing as you need to. So what you want to do is put your hand on your heart and you want to feel, where am I at with the forgiveness in this area? And say, I am willing, I am willing, I am willing. And on that, until you say I am willing as much as you need to. And then when you get to the place where you can feel the I am willing kicks in, I am willing to forgive them. All right. Now there's a whole other way of looking at forgiveness as well, but that's a good starting point. Now we need to do this work, all right? Holding on to our emotions, internalizing them without resolution keeps bitterness in place deep inside of us. We can be the happiest person, we can be cheerful, we can be kind, caring, loving, but if we don't deal with this stuff, it will come back and bite us on the backside, and we will have a bitterness inside of us, deep inside of us, that we haven't touched. And it's possible to have that without knowing until we do our abandonment recovery work as well, all right? Without love, we don't grow. Love is the water to our soul and our brain, all right? And that is why we need to do this work. We want to keep growing and we want to keep our brain and our soul watered with love. And love isn't this ooey gooey feeling that we feel at the beginning of the relationship. Love is feet firmly planted on the ground and being absolutely conscious of the decisions I'm making and the next 5 steps after the decision I'm making. Okay, so we want to be conscious of, if I make this decision, what's the outcome for the next 5 steps. Okay, thank you for joining in today, everybody, and it's wonderful to be back here this week. I hope this helps. Please feel welcome to leave any comments, or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. This handout is already up in the free complex PTSD resources, so you can go through. I've listed everything that I've spoken about now. The link is up, and the PDF is called How to Stop Holding a Grudge and Why We Need to Do the Work to Let Go. You can download it for free and you can begin working on it and working on what we've spoken about this morning as well. Have the most gorgeous day or the most gorgeous evening wherever you are in the world, and remember, no matter what, you are loved. Bye for now.